Then we'll be ready to go once you hear that the recording has started.
Is there any way to get that on one of those?
Oh.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we'll start the meeting. Welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting, Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. I would like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish First Nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on qathet, also known as Lasqueti Island. We have before us an agenda. Are there any changes any director, committee member, I should say, would like to make, or would I like to look forward, or if not, I would look forward to a motion. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'd move the agenda. There was one thing I was
we'll be ready to go once you hear.
Could we move reconsideration of a motion we passed at the last Finance Committee meeting? And where would we put that on the agenda?
Corporate officer?
Yes. Sorry, which motion would that be?
That would be, I believe it was 7.1 from the previous agenda, which is the Fire Services Capital Asset Management, and it would be the one related to the MVFD statutory reserve, where we went from 29,000 to 200,000.
Would that come up in the? Could that come up in the finance draft one? Because that's related to the draft.
I think it would.
Yeah.
I just let me very quickly explain. My understanding is if I don't move some kind of reconsideration, then it's difficult to reconsider when we get to the financial plan, but we can consider it all as part of the same package, if that's okay.
Yeah, so we understand that'll be coming from corporate officer.
Yes, I'm just trying to see how it was. I just want to make sure we have the right motion before we. So, would that be the motion that the committee recommend to the board that the board direct staff to increase the Malaspina Fire Protection Service annual contribution to the statutory reserve?
Yes, that is correct.
29,412 to.
Yeah, that is correct. And with
so that seems in order. I think that can come up in the. Oh,
sorry, Chair, go ahead.
so
is that under 8.3?
I don't know why it's cutting back out. Yes, I believe that should come up under 8.3. Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the agenda from Director Gisborne. Is there a seconder for that? Director Lennox. Okay, is there any discussion on that? Yeah, Director Lennox. Thanks. I'm trying a headset to see if my sound is better, so if it's not, let me know. Okay, so any discussion on that? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that carries. Okay, we have minutes from January the 7th, 2025. Are there any changes or omissions that anyone identified? And if not, I would seek a motion to adopt those. Director McCormick, Director Lennox, seconded. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. My internet's quite slow today for some reason. I think the snow, so bear with me. We have no delegations and inquiries. We have one item of unfinished business, and that relates to a letter from January the 8th from Mayor Ron Woznow, City of Powell River, regarding the recreation service. And there's a recommended or suggested motion in the package. What would the committee like to do with this? Director Gisborne and then Director Brander. Director Gisborne.
Well, yeah, I was going to actually move that we postpone this item until after we conduct the service review.
Okay, so after the service reviews, that would be after the budget. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that for discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is to postpone this till after the service review, which would, I'm not sure what that would mean for the budget, but go ahead, Director Gisborne, if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, when we get into our financial plan, we're going to be discussing like what the amounts of each service are, and the recreation complex, sub-regional recreation complex funding service will be part of that discussion. This motion kind of goes an extra step of like, okay, how much are we going to contribute to the municipality? We have a board meeting this afternoon, and a motion on that agenda for this afternoon is that the board respectfully decline the recreation funding request from Mayor Woznow, as this matter will not be resolved until the sub-regional recreation contribution service establishment bylaw service review has been completed. So this afternoon, we're, most likely going to pass a motion that says, hey, we're going to go through the service review and then we'll get back to you on the funding request is. So if the finance committee goes, okay, well, we'll hand over money, while at the same time saying, well, we'll get back to you, it kind of gives a mixed message. So I'm not opposed to, figuring out what our service limit will be, but I am opposed to, going along with this motion at this time until we've actually gone through the service review, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item before putting it to a vote?
Oh,
Director Brander.
Oh, you'll have to speak up. For some reason, my video seems to be freezing.
I believe it was Director Elliott had her hand.
Oh, Director Brander, yes, there you go. Go ahead. Well, Director Brander had his hand before that. So Director Brander and then Director Elliott. Go ahead, Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. I see the two motions as being separate. The one that we're going to deal with this afternoon can be discussion of an ongoing agreement, whereas right now we're trying to do something prior to the budget being passed. And the number that has been presented to us in the package was determined by a formula used by our CFO, and based on, I believe, the past agreement that has run out. But I think as a matter of goodwill, we should continue. Otherwise, the city is going to be without any funding for the recreation service. And the voters have said that they want to support this. So I think we should go ahead and at least provide them with this amount of money this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Director Elliott, you're muted. Oh, there you are. Can
you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I concur with.
Go ahead.
I concur with Director Brander, and I also wanted to point out that this is a decision to put something in the budget in the interim to anything that might come out of a service review or subsequent negotiations for a new agreement. I think the recreation service is super important to everybody in the community, and putting it at jeopardy to wait for other processes to happen is not, I'm not in favor of doing that, so I would be against this motion. I think we need to do some sort of interim arrangement and then sort out the longer term stuff as we move along. And the carrying forward with the funding that was already agreed to in the past agreement, even though the agreement is expired, seems the good faith thing to do. And I'm not in favor of postponing that.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? And I'd like to point out, I seem to have an audio delay. I believe it's the local internet here. So if that causes problems, let me know, especially in recognizing speakers. So get my attention. So is there any further discussion on the motion on the table, which is to postpone this request, this item, until after the service review? Anyone who hasn't spoken the first time? Okay, Director Gisborne, was that your hand up?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Okay, so seeing no further, Director Gisborne, go ahead.
Oh. Thank you, Chair. My apologies for the confusion. There's a bit of a time delay. This motion says that we will contribute the money this year to the city of Powell River. Now, one of the questions that comes up is we have no agreement. Yes, the formula was spelled out in the old agreement. And I'm not saying, okay, we don't give them any money this year. My opposition is we shouldn't be handing over this money right now. I do believe last year we did end up handing the money over, even though the board didn't give direction. But that came late in the year. Like, we don't have to give the money right now. I think that we really do need to sit down and sort out what's going on with the sub-regional recreation service. So I'm not opposed to setting the amount, but I think it gives a really mixed message to say, hey, we're not going to talk to the city and negotiate a 5-year agreement or any kind of agreement until after we do the service review. Oh, but by the way, here's $238,000. I don't think that's good governance in my opinion. So that's why I think we should just postpone this item of handing the money over until after we do the service review. And when we get into our budget, we set the limit. And because this is where we're going to have a bit of a challenge. Two separate things. Setting the limit and then handing the money over are two different items.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Is there any further discussion, Director Southcott?
Thank you, Chair. I'm focused on
Director
the
Southcott,
two.
there's a bit of a delay, so you'll have to bear with me when we're recognizing.
Thank you, Chair. We'll count to 3 before we start talking, right? I'm focused on the 2 words good faith. I have insight into, to some degree, thinking of City Council and thinking within the community, and have had since this agreement was signed. I think good faith is a good investment. And so I would be voting against this if I could vote, but I think it's a vote for the electoral areas. But I just wanted to add that perspective. Thank you.
You can vote.
Yeah. It was just electoral area.
Just a clarification, Director Southcott, this is a committee vote, so everyone votes on this one?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, this is the motion on the table. Oh, was there someone? No. Okay, so the motion on the table is to postpone this item until after the service review. I will call the question. All those in favor? Uh-oh, my internet seems to be frozen now. Is my audio still okay? Maybe if I may turn off my video, maybe that'll help. And so all those in favor, maybe say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and all those opposed?
Nay.
I'm opposed. It does not carry. I believe only one was in favor, everyone else opposed. Okay, so back to the item on the agenda. Is there any other motion? Director Brander had his hand up previously.
Well, actually, I did notice that Director Elliott had hers up first, so.
Oh, okay, Director Elliott and then Director Brander. Go ahead, Director Elliott.
I was just going to suggest that we perhaps consider going with the vice chair today just because of the difficult internet situation that we're facing today. I wondered what the committee thought of that.
I would be open to that because it's difficult with a 3-second delay.
Here it is.
Whatever works.
Looks like we're gonna change.
Corporate officer.
Yeah, so who's the vice chair corporate officer?
Thank you, Chair. I checked the invitation and it's Director Brander.
So need a motion or?
Okay, Director Brander, are you willing to chair this meeting, at least for now?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess there should be a motion. It would be better. Would someone like to make a motion for this?
I would make that motion.
So seconded.
Seconded, okay. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any, so call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? It carries. Director Brander, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Director Fall. We left it off was that a motion hadn't been called. I had actually raised my hand. I'm going to make the motion in the package. Director McCormick?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, you have moved the recommendation. Great. We have a mover for the recommendation in the package. Do we have a seconder? Director Southcott, thank you very much. Any discussion? Director Gisborne, and Director Paul, I don't know if you want to turn your camera back on or if you just want to let me know when you want to speak. Whatever works for you.
Okay, I'm going to phone in and then maybe my voice will be better and then I'll speak up if I need to.
Okay, well, just if you
I'm
have
in
your
favor
hand,
of this one
we
when it
don't
comes
see you, let us know. Director Gisborne.
Yeah. On to Director Southcott's point. Oof. Director Fall, can you mute yourself on Zoom?
I'm gonna mute him.
I believe the corporate officer is.
He's rubbing against his own headset mic. There we go.
Muted?
There we go.
Okay, Director Gisborne, floor is yours.
Thank you. That in good faith, the funding participants. No, those words matter. It comes down to like contract negotiations. If we're working our way into an agreement and we pass a motion that says in good faith, we're going to provide you with this much money, but then after we do the service review, we come up with something different. Well, now we're not acting in good faith. And I think that by passing this motion as is, actually handcuffs our service review committee that is going to be digging into this, because our service review committee might come back with a variety of other options. But this is locking us into this year. And really, I think we need to get a funding contribution agreement signed by both parties where we sit down and talk to each other. That's really been the barrier to the challenges that we've been having with the sub-regional recreation service funding agreement, is that the agreement expired not last year, the year before, expired in 2023. And if we wanted to renew it, we should have renewed it in June of 2023. It's 2025 now. If we really wanted to get the money, I think, the municipality should have asked to update the agreement like a year and a half ago or more. So I think the municipality can wait a little bit, because we're still going to have to figure out what the amount should be. But I think we also still need to figure out what happened last year. Because as I understand, we set the amount as a weighted vote amongst the whole board. And then later on, we find that, well, the money's been handed over. And that's a challenge I have. That's going to be addressed in the service review.
Do I have any other speakers? Southcott, followed by Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. I think I know the answer to, and that is that should there be a different resolution coming out of the service review than is consistent with this resolution we're looking at right now? Is it not possible for the board to change amount, for example, that might be contributed, or any other conditions of the of an agreement? That's the question.
Okay, who wants to jump on that one? No, for Ms. Greenan. Okay, there, go ahead, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. Is the audio good for?
Director Fall, can you hear Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair.
No, Director Elliott says a thumbs up.
Oh, she's there. Okay. Thank you. Yes. I think what Director Southcott is asking is, can we, so basically, I think if we budgeted the amount and said, that the board agreed to budget $238,244 as a contribution to the sub-regional recreation service this year. And I suppose you could put something like pending results of the 2025 service review, so that it's in the budget, because we have to have it in the budget. Otherwise, there's no money to pay from if the board decides.
Okay. You have any follow-up to that?
Yeah, don't have any certainty at all of what the results from a service review would be. I know that as I remember, I believe my memory is accurate, that council asked our staff to address this quite some time before it actually happened. And as everybody knows, the city has had monumental challenges with staff turnover and capacity essentially. So I'm not making excuses, but things only happen as fast as they happen. So I'm anticipating a really healthy discussion. I am also looking forward to that with the expectation that we can come to an agreement that works for all of us in our region. And yeah, I did gap a little bit on the way, you know, the finances work differently here. I understand the differences. Then the city has more flexibility as far as making changes like that. So I would welcome whatever flexibility could be afforded here to allow for the most open and in good faith discussions possible, not just in the service review, but also in what I expect probably will be discussions between the board and council subsequently. That's just my expectation. So I just wanted to put that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I've got Director Elliott and then Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. So my perspective on this is similar to my other perspective. I don't think any of the other service reviews are discontinuing services while the service review is going on. So the Malaspina Fire Department is still providing services while the service review goes on, and the intention is whatever comes out of the service review be implemented after the service review is over, and not try to cut or make changes prior to that. So what Director Gisborne is suggesting is that we halt all of our existing support to the recreation center pending this review. And I don't agree that that is what is intended from a service review, and I don't think it's good governance. I think it creates undue hardship on the parties involved, and the people have done a referendum and said they think it's important to support the recreation center. Yes, we have some things to sort out. Doesn't mean we should be holding the rec center hostage while we sort them out. So, in my opinion, continuing with formulas derived from the agreement that we had, even though it has expired, is an excellent interim way to proceed pending the outcome of the service review and any future negotiations to renew that agreement. And so that's what I will be voting in favor of, should I have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Just furthering on Director Southcott's question to Ms. Greenan, if I may. We do budget amendments, do we not, Ms. Greenan? And so should, as a result of the service review, determine that this number should be different? Could a budget amendment not be made at that time?
Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. Yes, we do budget amendments, but they have to be within that service budget. For example, if we did a budget amendment for general administration where we needed additional money, we do have a non-stat reserve that we could draw the funds from. But in this case, we don't have a non-statutory reserve, so there would be no funds to draw from. And the board can't budget for it would be a deficit, and the board can't budget for a deficit.
Okay, thank you. So then any change in the funding formula then could actually go to 2026.
From what I understand, could, yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have your hand up for something or no?
Thank you. I was just going to say procedurally, you could move to contribute this much, and if through the service review it was determined that a higher level was needed and that there was budget for that service, you could move an additional motion later to contribute more. And I think that might have been part of the question as well. So you can make this decision now based on the old formula, negotiate a new formula, and adjust it if that was needed later on, as long as there was money in the budget.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Okay, second time, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Director or Chair Brander. maybe I'm a little confused. Our committee of the whole passed a motion, I believe it was unanimous, that was that the board respectfully decline the recreation funding request from Mayor Woznow, as this matter will not be resolved until the sub-regional recreation contribution service establishment, blah, 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 has been completed and the expired Powell River Recreation Complex funding service agreement is renegotiated. That was unanimous amongst the committee of the whole. We said, hey, we're going to decline the recreation funding request. I thought that's how this assembly stood as well, because it's all the same folks. I agree with our CFO, Linda Greenan. We can set the budget, and then we can have that conditional on what comes out of the service review, and of course, going through the negotiations to set up a 5-year contribution funding agreement. Because one of the challenges is if this comes up every year, it's going to just, take up so much of our time. That's one of the reasons for initiating a service review, is to actually get into a 5-year agreement. So I see those as two separate issues. One issue is, what do we set the budget? And the other issue is, do we hand the money over to the municipality and how much? The motion that's in front of us, when I read it, doesn't say we will set the requisition at $238,000. It says we will contribute this much money this year to the City of Powell River Recreation Service. This motion is not about setting the budget. This motion is about handing the money over. And I think that's why I'm confused, because I'm hearing folks saying that we're talking about setting the budget limit and other folks talking about handing the money over. But the same assembly members at the committee of the whole already passed a motion that said we're going to decline the funding request until after we do the service review. And now we're turning around and going, well, we'll give you the money. Can someone help me here? I'm confused. Because it's inconsistent.
I'll put my name on the speakers list. I'm actually looking at the letter from Mayor Woznow, and it is requesting the qathet Regional District the maximum contribution for 2025 to 2029 inclusive. So the request is being made for a 5-year period, and we declined to follow through on that until a service review is done, and then we would enter into a new agreement. Then we are now offering up essentially in goodwill faith so that they are still able to operate and budget for the amount coming from the regional district, the amount of $238,244. So just for a bit of clarity there, we turned down the 5-year agreement and we offered up this 1-year contribution instead until we can come up with a new agreement in the future.
So are we setting?
Hold on. Is there any other?
Point of order.
Any other?
You set yourself on the speakers list, and I thought you were answering my question.
Were you recognized by the chair?
No.
No. Have you spoken?
That's why I'm saying point of order.
Everybody else. Now I'm going to ask around. Does anybody else have anything to contribute? Pardon? Oh yes, Director Elliott.
Geez, what are we doing?
I just believe that I was not in favor of that motion when it came up last time, and I wanted to, I'm not entirely certain, but I thought I had voted against that motion. Just to put the record straight.
Okay. Do we have any other speakers? Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, it's a bit of a pickle because the other thing that I took notes on last time we discussed this is obviously we don't have a line item. This is another almost $300,000 that we're going to have to go to the taxpayers that we didn't even plan for. So looking financially, it's another hit. So, but I think the service review is going to take a little time, right? And we're going to be well past budget season. So I get what Director Gisborne's saying is we're talking about what's in our budget, but also if and when we pay the city because there's a request before us. And the request was 5 years. So that's kind of moot. We voted that down. So really this is an initiative amongst ourselves to use a previous formula to find out what should constitute a fair decision. So, yes, we want to, not leave the city hanging. And there's been a lot of good comments around good faith. And this is a stopgap measure for us to be able to assess what the service is or is not providing. I mean, I've seen some of the the calculations. I've looked at the map of the different parts of I mean, that's the meat of the bones that we'll get into in the service. Really what we're talking about is, are we going to cough up an interim measure here to get through to next year? That's in my mind, right? So I appreciate the discussion. I want to flush this out and maybe give people a chance more than just 2 comments, because this is important. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, any other hands? Director Gisborne, it's the third crack.
And then
Director Elliott for her third crack.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry, I guess I'm still a little confused. So my thoughts are, we got to set the budget by the end of March. That's what we have to do. We got to put the money aside. We have this other issue about the service review, which will determine how much money the municipality actually gets. Keep in mind, we could set the budget for the sub-regional recreation service, but any cost for the service review will come out of that service. So we're going to have to put more into that service than what goes to the municipality. There's already every year we take $1,500 for administration for that service as well. So putting the money aside, I'm totally in favor of. The service review is interesting because they do have time commitments. Like, it's not going to be like 2027 by the time we finish the service review. I believe that, is it July or something? We pretty much got to be wrapped up. Interesting thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the regional district doesn't get the money from the provincial government or our tax requisition until I think sometime in August. Yeah.
through the chair.
So through the chair, I'm saying a nod from our CFO. So I'm totally in favor of putting the money aside. By the time August comes around and we actually get the money from the taxpayers, I believe we'll be at a place where we can make a decision on how much money goes to the municipality. And at that point, we'll have the money in the bank. We're not going to have to do short-term borrowing from the regional district to then hand it to the municipality. So that's why I'm actually not in favor of this motion, because it's committing us to providing the funding right now. I'm not in favor of providing the funding right now. I'm in favor of putting the money aside in the budget. Like, that's my thoughts, is we should do that. We should put the money aside in the budget, so that way when we sort out through the service review, which is not going to take years, it's by August, I'm sure we'll have it figured out, we'll have it banged out, we'll be meeting with the municipality and get down to a 5-year agreement, and we're off to the races. So voting down this motion, I don't think is going to restrict our ability to provide the funding to the municipality. And I think that if we want to set the requisition limit, that this is not the motion to do it with. And I'd be happily willing to move a motion to set the requisition limit to this amount, or this amount plus, the administration costs and so on and so forth. And then we hold off on actually providing the funding. And I would even put forward the date of August, at our August meeting, which, funny enough, our August board meeting will be in Area B. So if the residents are mad, they'll come and tell me.
Okay, Director Elliott, you had a comment? Then
Yes.
Southcott and then Director Fall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I do understand the distinction that Director Gisborne is making, and I still respectfully disagree. First comment, I believe our budget has had money for provision to the rec service in it before. It's not addition to that we hadn't planned on, because I believe we've always been basing it on a particular formula, which could be figured out and put in the budget, and was probably in draft 1. The additional, based on the actual expenses from last year, may not have been in draft 1 because they had not maybe had that information yet. But the amount that comes out of that formula that we're dealing with today doesn't just have to be in the budget, it has to be in the city's budget, and therefore a commitment, whether you pay in August or September or what have you, is the way to go. The city also has to know what money they're going to be getting from where, and it can't wait until August or whenever for us to sort that out. And I think that would provide undue hardship. If the city knew ahead of time that, let's say, the money was going to be less than what we have in our budget, then they might have to make cuts or some such thing to services right away in order to meet those targets and have that in their budget. And so this idea that you can just decide later what you're paying for a service that is continuing today is, in my mind, not a good thing to think. So I would be against that, setting it in the budget and not making a commitment either. I think we need to decide during the budget process what it is we're committed to and stick to it. And then changes coming out of the service agreement would be backed up by the service agreement information and likely have some kind of process for perhaps affecting next year's budget. I think that's the rational way to think. I might be wrong about that, but that's how I think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Southcott.
Thanks, Chair. There's no time. I don't see it a month. This resolution says will contribute the money this year. So that doesn't restrict the regional district to paying at any particular time. And I like that, because in my thinking, that gives plenty of flexibility to change this if that is appropriate, right up until December 31st, if you will. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous to suggest that, but the point is, it seems like there's a lot of time to actually be flexible to make changes should a service review actually determine that that's the thing to do. That was going to be a question, but it's an observation, really. Probably it's debating too.
Okay. Thank you, Director Fall, and then Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chairs. Is my audio okay on the phone?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, I just have a couple of comments. One is the budget right now, draft 3, does include on page 100 a requisition for this service, and the amount that's in the expenses that's a contribution to the City of Powell River is right now at $233,000. So this one, $233,000. So this is approximately the same. It's not a big change to the draft 3 of the budget of this. It's really a timing issue, and I see a couple things. One is the discussion we're having relates to short-term versus long-term. Right now, in the short term, we need to adopt a budget, and we heard from Director Elliott how this would impact city's ability to plan for this year. Whereas the service review, in my view, is a long-term process. Even though it might be concluded fairly quickly, it's about rearranging and reconsidering changes to long-term arrangements of a service. So they are quite different, and I think trying to make the short-term issue contingent on a longer-term planning issue that may or may not finish by August seems to be a bit of a challenge. So that's why I'm in favor of this motion. I wasn't in favor of the full request from the City of Powell River, because that was different from this. I was requesting a massive increase up to the requisition limit, which was not appropriate given the fact that there's no agreement in place. So I just wanted to make those points to explain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director McCormick.
Just to add that I don't think it's our purview to decide when staff send checks to the people that they send checks to. That's operational, and staff in their wisdom will do what's appropriate. So I don't think we should be having that discussion. So I support the recommendation. Thank you
very much. We have gone around this, so I think I'll call the question on this one. It's the motion in the package. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Correspondence. We have 3 different items. Is there any business arising from said correspondence? Director McCormick?
6.1.
All right, 6.1 is the new 7.1. Anything else?
I have a question, Chair, if I might.
Sure, go ahead.
So these items are mostly about funding requests. And so the question for the chair is, would it be better to address some of these requests right now as the correspondence, or would it be better to raise these items as amendments to the budget when we get to item 8.3?
Guess I would ask the officer or the manager of financial services. Go ahead, Ms. Greenan.
I think, sorry, I was just gonna say, staff just need direction, so we can do it now with the correspondence, address each one, and that will provide direction to staff for the final budget.
You're rather ambivalent to it. Greenan, do you have a preference or?
For the chair, No, I think that that would work as well, because then that would give direction for the budget. You know, individually, then it's nice and clear.
Okay, so we're suggesting we could do it right now. Let's moving on to seven.
Okay, I'd like to pull 6.3 then, please.
Okay, so 6.3 is now 7.2. Nobody wants to pull the last one?
I was gonna say, shouldn't we pull them all there?
Okay.
That's them. Whichever order you like.
Well, yeah, why don't we just can we just do them in order?
I would.
We're not bouncing around.
Yeah.
We'll start off with the
Please.
Texada Library Coordinator, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question to staff. They put in requests regularly each year, all in the sort of 2,000 price range. And my question is, does this get included in the Powell River Public Library budget? Or do we have a separate line item for them, for the Texada Library?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, it is included in the Powell River Library budget. It's their line item in that budget.
So quick follow-up then. So would we need to approve a motion that that this funding be supported, or will that just be automatically go into the library budget?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I think a motion is appropriate, because while it's in the library service budget, it isn't part of the budget proposal that comes from the Powell River Library. It is additional funding. So I think it would be, I actually do have this amount already included in the draft budget. But I think it's appropriate on a motion.
Then I would so move.
So move it. Okay, Director Gisborne seconds. Thank you.
It's seconded.
Oh, yes, okay.
Sure, just quick.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks. Just for my learning and those watching, sort of Director McCormick's point, I think, is that, so we budget every year within the Powell River Library. Is this a normal, like, it seems like every year or two, certain groups have to go through this a little bit extra. I'm just trying to understand, should we be kind of increasing their budgets overall in the beginning, or getting these last minute requests? I just need a little education on through the chair.
Yes, the Texada Library is a volunteer group.
Okay.
And so they generally ask for a specific amount. It just happens that this amount is, what it would have been if I had just increased the last year's amount by CPI. And so it happens to be the same amount. But generally, I think we do need a request from them, because they aren't officially part of the Powell River Library.
Okay, so it kind of flexes. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And Area D really appreciates the flexibility that the library enables them to continue to operate on a volunteer basis with the full access to resources. So the Powell River Library has been wonderful. And it's an arrangement that's worked very well.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have the question here. Put it up on the screen so everybody sees it. It's very simple.
An extra $50 for last year.
Okay, so that the committee recommend the board include $2,060 in the library budget for the Texada Island Library. We have no other questions or comments. I think we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
I see none opposed. Motion carries. So going to 6.2, the new 7.2 regarding the qathet Museum and Archive Society. See with this one. Anybody?
That's to include the $5,000.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
to, are you coming up with something? Yeah.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you. And Dr. Lennox seconds it. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I guess it's through the chair to Ms. Green, and I believe this motion is appropriate. If we do want to add this $5,000 to the heritage service.
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. Just wanted to explain that it's actually not additional funding to the Heritage Service. It's just using, so they provided a budget for the year, and it would just be to allocate $5,000 of that budget
Allocation.
for some capital.
So is a motion necessary for this?
A motion is necessary because we specifically exclude capital from their agreement that they have to ask the board for approval for capital.
It's not extra. Okay.
Well, yes, sorry, I'm gonna just.
Coming up to the motion here, be a second.
Speak very briefly to it.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have to approve capital spending. If we got, big financial requests, like a new building or something like that, I think we got to give it a lot of thought. But $5,000 for computer equipment, I don't really want to take up too much of our time, and I'm comfortable with the approval of that amount.
I think that we would call this.
Heritage Contribution Service, I think. Yeah, Heritage Conservation Service.
Conservation.
All right, so we have a motion that the committee recommend the board allocates $5,000 for computer equipment, the Heritage Conservation Service.
I think it would be we
Budget.
approve, because it's approving the amount, right? Because it's already allocated. Is that correct? That we're approving the funding?
Yes, approving use of the funding.
Okay.
Okay, approve.
Expenditure.
We'll get there.
Approve expenditure of $5,000 for computer equipment in the Heritage Conservation Service budget. That's apparently what's been moved and seconded. So is there any discussion on that? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I see none opposed. Motion carries. So going on to number 3, 6.3. Regarding the Lasqueti Association.
Chair, I got my hand up.
Okay, Director Fall, are you moving?
Yes, so I would like to increase the budget by 5% over 2024 to $17,916. And if I get a seconder, I'll speak a little bit to it. But so while the corporate officer is crafting the motion, and apologies to her for not sending a full motion for it, the request from the LCA is in our agenda, and they didn't include the exact dollar figure, but they did say the request was increased last year to cover inflation based on 5% CPI. So that's what I would like to do.
Okay. We'll have a motion on the screen here momentarily. Director Elliott?
I just wanted to clarify that the budget talks about the QRD tax requisition as 19,678, and Director Fall's number was different than that, and so I just wondered if that was exactly if that matched what he wanted to do.
Chair, I'd respond to that if I might.
Director Fall, you.
Oh yeah, so I would say unfortunately this request is a little bit unclear, and I would even say that it's not quite complete. They have on the first page, we'd like to request a grant from the service, and they don't put a number. And then they say based on 5% CPI, which was the basis of my motion. And you're quite right. Director Elliott's quite right on this. The second page, there's a larger amount, which is 15% increase, which would fit in the requisition limit. But if the LCA wants to have an increase above inflation, they need to, in my view, explain what it's for. And this happened a couple of years ago with extra expenses for bookkeeping, and so that made a lot of sense. But there's no explanation, and I think I can't understand the difference between that number and the 5% request on the first page. So it's something I'm going to raise with the LCA to tell them they need to be more clear in their requests for us. But I think in the meantime, 5% increase is what they're asking for in their cover page.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. And seeing no other hands, we'll go with the motion that we have in front of us, which is $17,916. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Great. Moving on to reports, Fire Smart Community Funding and Support. How do you wish to proceed? New Director Lennox, Director Gisborne, any discussion? Lennox.
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, I think we're all aware, you know, I'm handing out pamphlets in my neighborhood literally about Fire Smart, and it is things that we can actually do with our community, for our community, and educate our community. So I appreciate our staff working on that. They've been getting the funding all the time. Let's just keep it going.
Agree, it's a great program. Any other comments before we have the vote? Director Gisborne.
Yes, sorry about that. I recall some conversations at UBCM and even amongst some directors at the Electoral Area Directors Forum about, I think it's called WASP or something like that, where they've had some communities with some really significant wildfires, and they're talking about getting like sprinkler systems on people's roofs, so that way, you know, they can essentially save the building as these massive fires roll over. I know this is fire smarting, which is about clearing the brush and stuff around the building, but could something like a grant for those kind of sprinkler systems be included as part of a future Fire Smart program, or are those things kept completely separate? I guess it's a question through the chair for our Manager of Emergency Services, who might have an answer.
On the screen, Mr. Toms.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a good question. And if I'm following that correctly, then actually the answer is we've already done some of that. We did access some grant funding years ago and have tapped into building a sprinkler structure protection trailer that we keep available here to our fire services. That's an ongoing thing. We may consider adjustments to that, but it is something that we do.
You need a follow-up? Sure.
Yeah. So I'm somewhat aware of that, where we have those sprinklers and they're in a trailer. What the director I was speaking to said that, you know, what's happening in some areas is the homeowners are getting these sprinklers and they're permanently fixing them to their roof. So that way nothing has to go and get set up in the event of a wildfire, other than essentially it being plugged into a water source. Now, of course, when you have a big significant wildfire and you lose power, that can be a challenge. But I guess the question is more of, are there grants available or could be available to private property owners that can then purchase these systems and then have them permanently asphyxiated to their roofs?
Mr. Toms, if you know of anything, or?
Yeah, through the chair, no, not that we're directly involved in. Typically, Fire Smart, I think as you were implying, is trying to encourage residential property owners to make improvements to their homes and properties that would be more passive. Sprinklers do fail, and we don't tend to ourselves manage grants that would support homeowners in buying sprinklers. We offer rebates for other Fire Smart improvements. There may be other grants out there that people can access themselves. The ones that we can access are really meant more for fire suppression activities that our fire services would tap into.
Very much. Seeing no other hands, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to 8.2, the 2025 assessed values. We have a recommendation. Move that. Director McCormick, any discussion? Director McCormick.
Yeah, just a quick question, Chair. When it says refers to taxable values for hospital district purposes, is that what we use for the regional district? Is that what everybody uses?
Ms. Greenan.
Why does it say hospital district?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. Yes, the taxable values for hospital district purposes are what we use for our tax base. And I think, and basically what that means is that, you know, that they're taxable for all the services in that region. Not, it doesn't include exemptions, etc.
Okay. Very much, Director Gisborne.
First of all, I want to say a big thank you to Linda Green for this report. I was actually speaking with some electoral area directors at the forum, and they don't necessarily have access to the assessed values for each service. And when we get this, it's wonderful because it allows us to understand, when we set the requisition amount and then we have like the total assessed value, because one of the big questions is always like, well, how much does my personal taxes change? This really allows us to kind of keep it clear in our mind. And I got one question though for clarification, and I think I know the answer, but I might be wrong. We have on page 4 assessed value changes, and then on page 5 tax base changes. Is my understanding correct that the assessed value is like the full assessed value, and then the tax base is like when we go to requisition funding, we're using the tax base values is like the difference between the two.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you. So the assessed value is the actual taxable assessed value. So, of the property. The converted values, the reason I show that is that converts the values from strictly assessed values to converts them so that we can look at things in a residential tax rate. So for example, when I say, the residential tax rate is $3.30 per 100,000, that would be for a residential property. And then if you were a business, it would be times 2.45. So this way, converting them gives you what the tax base is. So if you wanted to take the dollar value that you're requisitioning and you could divide it by the converted values to get your residential tax rate. If you divided it by the net taxable values, you wouldn't get residential tax rate. It wouldn't give you the same it's not the same equation.
Well, thank you. In that case, my initial assumption was incorrect. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, I have Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the non-market change. Is that primarily new construction generally, or is there some other factor for that that's significant?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the non-market change is primarily new construction, but it could also be, they could have a market change, if they change, if somebody added on to their building, or if BC Assessment found something. So say they found that there was a garage that they didn't assess before, they would call that a non-market change. But it could also be, I've got a list on page 2, so it could be something that their property class changed. So say they were a business class and then they've changed to residential. Now it will show as a non-market change and a reduction in it. So primarily new construction.
Good, thanks very much. Seeing no other hands up, I think we'll call the question on this. So all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. 8.3 financial plan draft 3. Ms. Greenan, do you have a presentation for us?
They do.
Great. Can see that?
Yep.
Great.
Go ahead. Through the chair, so I'm pleased to provide draft 3 of the 2025 to 2029 financial plan for the Qathet Regional District. In this presentation, I'll review again the assumptions that go into developing the plan. I'll also review the changes from draft 2, and then I'll outline some highlights of the capital plans for 2024, then the residential tax rates per $100,000, estimated cost per average home, and I'll open the floor to questions and then just review what our next steps are.
Okay.
In the assumptions, operational costs, we look at specific costs for a number of items. And then if we don't have specific costs, then we assume an escalation of generally between 3 and 5%. As a return on investments, we're projecting 3% for 2025. CPI came in at 2.6% change for BC, and that impacts the exempt staff salaries, directors' remuneration, and a lot of our labor contracts are based on, or escalated based on the BC CPI, so that's incorporated into these budgets. Future borrowing is projected between 5% and 6%, and that is mainly because we don't know often when the borrowing is going to happen. Three, the payroll allocations are now based on the 2024 time and motion study. So that means that some of the payroll allocations have shifted between the services. They haven't increased, but they've shifted. You might see that in some of the detailed service budgets. Some changes in draft 3. Some of the main changes are we have the contributions to the fire services reserve based on last month's approval by the board. And then also we looked at the local government climate action planning grant and realized that we could use some of that funding for the office HVAC replacement and mausoleum window replacement. So that made a change in the budget, and you'll see that in the outline. And then we've also decreased we had the cost for the service reviews initially in electoral area B at administration, and those have been reallocated to Lasqueti volunteer regional recreation, sub-regional recreation, and the social planning services in that budget. Capital plans for the regional services, there are about $695,700 general administration, we can go, which is it's a shared cost, but it comes out of the general administration service initially. And as I mentioned, the HVAC system is going to be replaced, and that we propose to use that from LGCAP funding. At Shelter Point Park, there's a shower and washroom renewal and a water main replacement. Palm Beach Park, they're going to replace the washroom and concession roof, and they're also going to replace the concession doors with some heavy-duty steel doors. At the cemeteries, the mausoleum windows are going to be replaced, and again, that's LGCAP grant funded. And in the emergency preparedness service, there's replacement of the EOC generator, and that is partially grant funded. In the electoral areas, there is $4.27.
A little bit more than that.
$1 million worth of new capital. And a large portion of that is the Northside Recreation Center expansion and upgrade. And then in all of the fire departments, there are some equipment purchases. They're partially grant funded. And Savory Marine, there's the wharf fire protection. In the electoral areas, there's replacements of $1.51 million. Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, there's replacement of the wood deck in Hall 1 and FPGA equipment. The City Volunteer Fire Department, there's replacement of a drying cabinet and water tanks. Savory Volunteer Fire Department, replacement of engine 21. And Northside Volunteer Fire Department, there's replacement of engine 13, and then replacement of the turnout gear washer and SCBA equipment. At Lund Sewer, there's replacement of a pump, and at the Texada Recreation Service, there is replacement of the tennis court equipment. So what this means is residential tax rates ranging from, so the change in the residential tax rates range from $6.95 within the city of Powell River, and then the highest is $36.58 in electoral area E. That's $100,000. And the cost per average home is a change of $36.02 per average home within the city of Powell River, and then $306 in electoral area C. So that concludes my presentation, and if anyone has any questions.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the financial plan round three? Director Elliott, you have your hand up. Start off with you and then Director McCormick.
Yeah, my question's just very
Oh.
brief to ask what if the future borrowing ends up being, say, a 1% lower than what we've forecasted, and we have a surplus of funds. What happens with that? Do we get to choose to lower taxation for the following year, or how do we have that used in our system?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so with the regional district system, all services are siloed. So if there was a surplus, we would budget for a specific amount of debt payments. And if they were less, then there would be a surplus in that service. And then the board would consider how to use that surplus going forward. It could be used to reduce tax. It's generally reused to reduce taxation, or it could be put to the reserve, which would also allow us to reduce taxation over years in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm with Ms. Green, and so my understanding is correct. The operating budget is 17.1 million and capital is 6.9. Have I got that right?
Yes, I'm just going to confirm that. Through the chair, yes, the operating budget is 17.1 million, and the capital budget for 2024 is 6.8 million.
6.8. Okay, thank you. I have a couple of.
Sure, go ahead.
I may. All right, the grant in aid, and I'm I'm looking at page 15 of the report. We agreed that the grants in aid would remain the same for 25 as they were in 24. So I'm looking at the individual area grant and aid where it says that requisition in 24 was 144,000, but in 25 it's 156. So I'm just wondering if we agreed to keep it the same, why is the increase there?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, so if you look at page 55 of the package, that shows the details of the grants.
Okay.
And that, so what that is the budget. You look at the budget for 2024 compared to the budget for 2025.
Page 17 of the report.
50. Further on in all of the details. 55, 148.
55. I've got page 55. Yeah. Of the agenda. No, page 55 of the report. Okay. All right. So page 55 of the report.
Yes.
Okay.
Be the grants and aid, the detailed grants and aid budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the expenses section, the budget for 2024 and budget for 2025 are identical. Why the requisition changes is because there's a different amount of surplus coming forward than there was in 2024. So the surplus in 2024 was much higher than it was in 2025. Coming forward, 2020, like so the surplus from 2023 coming forward to 2024 was higher than the surplus coming forward from 2024 to 2025. So the
Okay.
surplus reduces, we use the surplus to reduce the amount of taxation for each of
Mhm.
those budgets.
But if there was, if I may, Chair,
Sure.
if there was a situation like Area D where basically there was no surplus, I think it was $100 left, would it not be the same then? Or because of the rollover from 23 going into 24?
So,
Okay.
so for example, Area D in 2023, it had a surplus of 5,000. Oh, sorry, I don't know what the surplus was in 2020.
I think that was,
Yes, there would have been a bigger yes, there was a bigger surplus. $5,090 was the surplus for Area D in 2023. That came forward in 2024, and then this year is $128.
okay.
So that's the difference.
Thank you. I understand. I do have another question, but I'm happy to wait if other people want to ask.
Well, I know there are other questions
All right.
out there, but
Okay.
is it just one more question?
Question.
Go ahead.
Okay. When something is in the capital plan, like refinishing the tennis courts on Texada, that was really in the capital plan for 24, but it didn't happen. So for 25, what happens to the money that was budgeted for that project in 24, or really any project that doesn't happen for some reason? Like, does that go into a reserve and people are retaxed for the project the next year? Or how does that work?
Green, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So that's the beauty of the siloed services. So that would have been funded from, that project would have been funded from the Texada Recreation Reserve Fund. And so when it doesn't get spent, it just stays in the reserve fund. And so when we put that forward for the next year, then it would come out of the reserve fund when the actual project gets done. If it doesn't get done, it just simply stays in the reserve fund and doesn't get used.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, and thank you with thanks to our financial staff for doing such a good job on the budget. The first question relates to the social planning service, and on the details on page 97. And I'm just trying to, maybe it's just a memory lapse, but it seems like the budget from last year has this grant from 150,000. It wasn't spent, and the budget this year has 105,000. So, and then with some requisition to make that up, but the amount is. So, are these? I guess I'm just looking for clarity on what exactly this money that's going in and out of that service is, in particular for this year.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. That's actually the MRDT funding flowing through the service. So that's the Municipal Regional District Accommodation Tax. And so it's just a grant that comes to us through the Sunshine Coast Tourism, and then we pay it out to PRESS, Powell River Employment Services Society. So again, we expect 105,000 will come in 2025, and then we'll pay that out.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I thought it was something like that, that we were using it for the MRDT, but just seeing the numbers go in and out. My second question relates to the motion, the recommendation, which is the three parts. But the second part says that the board directs staff to allocate surpluses that are not scheduled to be brought forward to support 2025 budgets to the most appropriate reserve service. And the question relates to the fire departments in general, but the Lasqueti Island Fire Department in particular, because the January board meeting, the board adopted part of the motion that the board adopted was to regarding the LIVFD service, to direct staff to apply additional surplus from 2024 to 2025 as revenue. So my question is, how would that recommended motion affect the surplus for the fire departments, which looks to be quite significant across all the departments? How would that affect each of the fire departments if that recommended motion is adopted by the board?
Go ahead.
When we prepare the budget, we always try to anticipate what the surpluses might be, or a ballpark, just because we have so many adjusting entries at the end of January. We're still getting entries. We haven't completed them yet. So when I prepare the budget, I don't actually know the exact surpluses. So by adding them to the reserve, they still get to stay within the service. They just don't, you know, we just haven't budgeted to reduce the requisition the subsequent year. It would be difficult because what we would have to do then is we would have to budget for us. We have to wait until our year end was done before we could complete the budget if we actually wanted to put the exact surplus into reserve. Or sorry, if we wanted to use the exact surplus in the subsequent budget.
Could I have a follow-up, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
In relation specifically to LIVFD, so on the LIVFD budgets, a few pages down, 100 and something, right now the requisition is an increase of quite a bit, going from 364 to 425. So that's a 18% increase. So an increase in the budget by $65,000. But the couple pages later, the projected surplus is actually identified as $186,000. And so, you know, we made motions at the last meeting in January to allocate $60,000 to the reserves, which are there. And one of the motions was to direct staff to apply any additional surplus from 2024 to as 2025 revenue. That was an adopted motion by the board. So with that, you know, I understand the uncertainty and I don't know exactly how to resolve it, but most of that surplus, according to that motion, in my view, would go towards the 2025 revenue. So how exactly will that happen in the LIVFD budget? Because the intent of the motions from January was not to, you know, allocate $60,000 plus $186,000 as a contribution to the reserves.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, you're correct. In the budget, I've only projected $47,000 surplus. And yes, it does look like it's going to be significantly higher. So what the board could do is preferably would be to make a motion to allocate the surplus of, and then we'll specify the amount. So maybe we can say, you know, assuming there might be, you know, maybe there's a few $1,000s that hasn't been posted yet, that the board allocate $160,000 of the prior year surplus, for example, to the 2025 budget for the Lasqueti Volunteer Fire Department. I can make that change before the final draft is adopted.
Thank you. I'd like to make that motion if it's in order, Chair.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have mover, Director Fall, second by Director. Have that written out anywhere, or can we get it written out?
Yes.
Or Director Fall, if you have something in mind, you could.
I think
no, I was basically what Ms. Greenan said. Well, if it makes more sense to wait and have more questions, discussion while our corporate officers.
Right, that's what I was.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's what I was hoping
we
for.
can
So we'll
consider
move
it
on right
time.
now to Director Lennox and come back to Director Fall's motion when it's ready. Lennox.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair. I was seconding this and it will come up again under Northside and Savory, the same concept. If you look at, we've identified some surpluses and really on page 6 of our 128-page report, financial planning strategy, the first bullet point is reliance on our prior year's surplus. And so I appreciate Director Fall. Him and I had a discussion prior to our meeting and really identified these. There's a lot for us to look at, but that's an opportunity in my mind. For Northside, it's 98,000 plus, and Savory, it's 96. So I can offset a lot of impact in my department so long, and the same thing for Lasqueti. This motion before us is for Lasqueti. So I think I understand completely, and barring any other information, I'm in full support of this.
Okay. And I have Director Elliott's hand.
Thank you. My question is about the MRDT, which tweaked my thoughts on that when I heard about that. And I don't know that it has any impact on this year's budget, but my question is, if if the board wanted to do some consideration about changing how we allocate those in the future, because we're in the middle of a housing crisis and there may be better ways to utilize that funding to support creation of housing within our area. How would we go about that? How would we go about a process to maybe change the way we distribute those funds to something that leverages or does, contributes to a broader project that rather than how we're doing it now?
I guess ideas would be brought forward or a staff report would be requested.
Should a motion be brought forward at a future meeting, or does it have to be
So
part of the
anything that would
budget
happen-
discussion?
I think anything that would happen, any change, it's too late to do anything with this budget. So once the budget is finalized, we'll have lots of time for next year.
Yes, so the process you're suggesting would be that we leave as is in the budget. I'm not even sure we're committed to doing it the way we're expending it or not. I don't know the answer to that. And then at some point bring a motion forward to put that to the board's consideration for maybe changing what we're doing for a future budget year.
Yeah, I would think that would be a proper way to go about it. Ms. Green has her hand up, she has a comment, so.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, generally what happens is when they collect that funding, they do come to the board with a report and say that they have how much funding they have. So I think at that point, I don't think this budget doesn't lock us into how that funding is used. It just shows that the funding will come in as a grant and then go out to something. So I don't think we have any agreements that lock us into that. I think that the board could have that discussion when Sunshine Coast Tourism comes forward with their funding, their grant report.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
This point, the MRGT funding is used currently for housing, and it's being I can't remember. 140,000 per year is given to the Powell River Educational Services Society Press, and to the Housing Hope Society group for non-market housing. So that money is already being used for that purpose.
Okay. All right. Did you have something to comment about that directly?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly, I was able to sit in on the tourism, regional tourism call yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, time flies. It really was a good explanation of the MRT. It helped me to understand where the money's going, like as Director McCormick said. And really, there's a new future coming for tourism in our area as far as what their needs are. So I think it really, as our staff has indicated, our next update will give us a real clear picture of what their next ask will be and what those funds will be used for. So,
okay. Thanks very much. Director Southcott.
Thank you. Just wondering what the timing is on when the board receives that report from Sunshine Coast Tourism.
Ms. Greenan? You recall when it usually comes in, or?
Chair, I can't recall. Maybe March? Is it March or April?
Okay, so soon.
March or April, from my recollection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, well, sorry to piggyback on the MRDT conversation. My question is, how did we handle the MRDT prior to the social planning service being created in 2018? Like, did we not deal with it at all, or did it require the social planning service, or did it take like a different form, like going through electoral area administration or something like that?
Ms. Greenan, do you have a?
Thank you, Chair. I don't recall that we had, that we received any MRDT.
I don't believe so either.
Social planning service.
Okay.
Okay, well, I have two questions related to the budget. I'm looking at the deck replacement for the Malaspina Fire Hall. I was just curious, could that be paid for out of community works funds?
no, we didn't vote on Andrews.
Oh, we haven't moved.
We haven't had it up.
Sorry. I was wondering where.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. The Community Works Funds does fund, you can fund fire halls with Community Works Funds.
Mhm.
The only thing is we generally have to have some sort of green element to it, like it has to have some kind of there usually is a green element tied to it, so we have to have some kind of a metric that says how it will increase. So if you're building a new fire hall, you generally have to have some kind of metric that shows that it's going to be built efficiently, and so I don't know, honestly, I don't know if it would fit for it. You might have to
Okay, well, it's a little late to explore that right now, I guess. And then the other one is, I understand, well, regarding the 2.5 million required for the RRC. From what I understand, the city has decided not to use community works funds, so I was wondering if you had a suggestion on how to address that.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, we should be receiving a letter from the city. There was a motion at the city council that they won't be using the their community work. They didn't want to use their community work funds towards it. So when we got the letter, we were planning on bringing back the report options.
Okay.
Because a couple of options are, well, one option, of course, is to use the just to borrow the full amount, and then that way it would be apportioned, you know, based on taxation through the city and the electoral areas. And the other option, of course, was to use part of our community works. But now that the community works funding is opened up to include fire trucks, I can see that there's a large need, you know, in all electoral areas. And of course, it would support recreation, fire trucks, fire halls, water, sewer. The board could then decide to borrow that money for the RRC and then retain the money and use it for the electoral area needs now that there's now that the list of projects is larger.
Okay. I was just curious because we're getting so close to finalizing the budget. When would that report be brought forward?
I don't think that one is necessarily, that could actually go through as a budget amendment.
Okay.
Because we have, right now, we've assumed that we're going to do the funding from Community Works and funding from the city's Community Works. It could come through as a budget amendment. We would just replace that with borrowing.
Okay, so we're not under the gun to get this done prior to finalizing the budget. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly for folks that are watching, because people are following, and I did want to bring it up later, just page 46 of 128, where we're talking about community works funds. My assumption is that budget assumption that 1.2 million-ish is coming from community works funds, and that we'd require an amendment to change that to borrowing. So I just want people to be clear, because as I follow through, I'm like, where are we? So.
Okay. Great.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing up the community works funds. Sorry. The community works funds issue related to our solid waste management service. It's one of the reasons why I had requested reconsideration of the previous motion to, you know, put money aside for fire halls, going from 29,000 to 200,000. We can use community works funds for fire apparatus and for fire halls. So, and it may not be the time right now at this exact moment, but my stance is we should take the community works funds that have been allocated towards the Resource Recovery Center, bring that back into the community works funds reserve, take full borrowing for the 2.5 million that is required to complete the project, and then we will have the community works funds available for things like fire hall and fire department apparatus, which would then decrease the amount of pressure needed to fill the fire hall reserve. That's one of the reasons why I brought it forward, hopefully reconsidered. Now on statutory reserve number 1, which is fire halls, I believe the balance right now before 2025's addition, about $386,000. Could we use statutory reserve number 1 to replace the deck at the fire hall number 1? And I see there's a proposed septic field upgrade or replacement in a year or two. Could we also use statutory reserve number 1 for fire halls for the septic system as well? Or is statutory reserve number 1 only for a brand new hall? Yes, it's a question through the chair to our staff.
Ms. Green, I think those were being paid out of reserves, but.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is planned that we are using statutory reserve number 1 for both the debt and then the upcoming subject. Everything related to the building is from statutory reserve number 1, and then we use the other reserves for their purposes. So that does include renovations.
Okay. And then to continue, thank you. It's now that hopefully we will have those community works funds available for our fire department apparatus and fire hall. I don't think that we actually do need to increase the requisition for the fire hall statutory reserve by such a significant amount. That's one of the reasons why I was like, hey, let's bring this back. Hopefully we should have enough community works funds being allocated and being put aside for fire halls. I know Area B got a significant amount of community works funds in the past for the Paget Road bike path. There's been a fair bit that's gone into the Myrtle Pond water system, but that only benefits a small portion of Area B. And for the rest of Area B, and even more so for Area C, I think those community works funds could really go to create a big difference in our fire department for apparatus and the fire hall. So I would actually be looking to reduce that contribution to reserve number 1. And a number of reasons are, at some point we will need to replace fire hall number 1 out south, but there's been a lot of discussion about where we locate it. And it also kind of gives us kind of strange perception if we're replacing the deck and putting in a new septic system. Well, does that mean we're going to build a new fire hall when we've putting all this money into an old building? I'm not entirely sold on that idea. So I would actually be willing to have a motion to reduce that contribution, though I'm not quite there yet. I got a few other questions and comments to get through, if that's okay with everyone. So let me just go through my checklist. Yep. And the reason why I'm asking for this to be reconsidered was I felt that we were kind of rushed when we adopted this motion at the Finance Committee, because we had our MLA come in and we wanted to make sure we didn't take up too much of our time unnecessarily. And yeah, community works funds has been mentioned. One of the questions that's come up is under our planning service, I see a 35% increase. And I'm just wondering, why such a large increase to the planning service? I know I put forward a motion to update Area B's zoning bylaws to be consistent with the OCP, but that got voted down. So I'm kind of trying to find a way to justify such a large increase, and my residents still have out-of-date zoning bylaws. Wondering why such a large increase? Are we planning for some big project?
Anybody who wants to take that one on? Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. Just be one moment. I just want to get to the
I should give it a page.
What page are you on?
It's regional planning. I believe that would be 57. 57. Position is 317 to 430.
Greenan, go ahead.
So the reason for the large increase in the planning service is that in 2024 we took quite a money from the reserve to try to supplement, to try to reduce the requisition. And I think that was a conscious decision of the board. So we transferred 97,000 more from the reserve for the 2024 budget than we are in 2025. So another way to reduce the requisition would be to, like, other than reducing the services that the planning department is doing, we could take more from the reserve. But that has implications down the road. It's going to look at
28% increase in spending. And then as a quick follow-up, because there's a number of drivers. I see a 28% increase for salary and wages under there. But I recall that we got I think it was called a capacity funding grant, which was from the provincial government, to update our OCPs and things like that. As I understood, there was still money left over, so I'm wondering, what is the status of that grant? Is it still sitting in account? Do we have it earmarked for something? Because I was able to kind of smooth talk the minister into saying, oh yeah, they're not gonna ask for it back, but I think it was kind of on this idea that, you know, we would use it for housing related initiatives within a reasonable amount of time. I don't want to be sitting there for 10 years and then have to try and answer some awkward questions.
Ms. Green, you have an answer for that one, the capacity building grant?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, I just have to take 1 minute to open up another file.
Sure.
Take a grant there.
That was the housing needs assessments. I don't think we spent the whole thing on housing needs assessment, but
Have it prepared if you would like me to share it.
Sure, while we're waiting for Ms. Green to come up with that info, why don't we deal with Director Fall's motion? Corporate officer's putting it up on the screen.
And sorry, I might have missed. Did we move and second this one?
I moved.
I seconded.
Okay.
If needed, I can, you know, I can confirm, reaffirm my movement of that motion.
All right, so we have the motion in front of us here. We have a mover and a seconder. Is there any more discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair,
Anyone opposed? Yes.
just to respect the corporate officers, you might want to prepare 2 more of those similar motions for Northside and Savory, and we can insert the, I think I have the right numbers, we'll confirm after. So
Okay.
just thought I'd get ahead of it.
All right, well, that has been dispensed with. Ms. Greenan, you ready for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, the housing initiatives capacity study fund, there was $96,912 remaining. And that is, you'll see that under, transfer from reserve as 96,912 budget. Well, that's supporting work that's going to happen in 2025.
okay, so that'll be up to the planning committee to earmark which project or projects. So that's a decision still to come. Sorry, through the chair.
Through the chair, thank you. I would, that I would have to direct to Laura Rodden, but not available right now. I don't know if she has, if Cherise Roberts is available.
Question.
So it's a question for the planning manager.
Are there any other comments or questions? Director Gisborne, you've
Yeah,
your hand up.
sorry, tentative. Yeah, I've been really struggling with like the exponential growth of requisition that we've been seeing in a number of services. And I'm just kind of wondering like about the long-term sustainability for our community. Because like, what was it, like general administration 10 years ago, under 500,000. And now we're up at like 2.5 million, I think. Like our general administration has actually surpassed the Sunshine Coast regional districts. And I'm seeing a lot of for sale signs in my area. I'm hearing from a lot of folks that they can't afford to live in the community anymore. And I'm just wondering, like, is this the norm? Is it going to continue to be exponential growth? And how do we as a board maybe change direction? Like, how do we change those expectations? You know, maybe we've been buying platinum service and maybe we want to go to gold or silver or maybe even bronze. And I guess that's more of a question to our board, to our assembly, because like, I'm not even 40. I don't know if I can afford to live in this community for the rest of my life, which I'd like to. Where's the limit? Question for the
It's
board.
kind of a big question and not one that we can get into today. Cost of operating local government has just gone up, as we see everything goes up. And expenditures, budgets come through this board. So it's a matter of cutting out services. And I don't know who's excited about doing that or who's willing to put forward those cuts, but it can always be proposed. But I have full confidence that our staff is managing the money efficiently and responsibly. So it's just a matter of what the community needs, what is being downloaded on us from the province. These are unfortunately the costs of doing business. So do we have any other comments on the budget? I'll go to see if anybody else has their hands up anymore. Otherwise, okay, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, so I've got, draft 1, draft 2, and draft 3. There's a number of cost drivers. I'm looking on financial plan draft 2, increased drivers, and I see a number of items, which was really helpful. But when I'm looking at draft 3, I don't see the same list or the same items. So for example, there was a flagpole, $10,000, but I don't see it on draft 3. Does that mean it's already included in draft 3, or has that been since removed, or?
Ms. Green, she has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It's included in draft 3 as well. I just didn't repeat that. I put that information on both draft 1 and draft 2. I didn't repeat it in draft 3. So those are incorporated into draft 3. And then there's those additional changes that I outlined.
So there is a $10,000 flagpole in this draft 3. I'm just thinking of, because I watched one of the Sunshine Coast Regional District's meetings, but it was actually like a round table where they had all the elected officials from the municipalities there. And there was something that occurred there that was really helpful. And the budget was broken down into essentially 3 categories. The first was, these are the musts. The downloading from the province, like the province says you have to do this, and that's what they got to spend money on. The second category was, board direction. The board said, we want to build this fancy thing. Staff said, well, this is what it's going to cost. And then the third category was, staff recommendations or staff requests, like the flagpole or things like that. And as a result, that allowed the elected officials to really understand the drivers and to actually choose hey, if we wanted to say no to everything and save as much money, here's the categories that we still have to spend money on. And when I'm looking at this budget, there are items which I would like to see in it, and there's some items I'd like to see removed. But I'm wondering, would it be, it's probably too late in the budget cycle to get some kind of presentation like that. But at the same time, I do think that we as a finance committee, because I would have to humbly disagree that, well, this is not the place to get into that bigger discussion about the financial impact on our community. I would argue and say this is where we discuss that. This is the finance committee. We are talking about the budget. This is our job. And I would even be willing to say, we don't have to have our budget in by the end of February. We have to have it in by the end of March. I would be very keen to ask for one more draft for March and to go through all the items that are wants and the items that are needs. Because it's a fire hall and a fire truck. You need a fire truck. We have a fire hall. We don't need to replace it right away. There are requirements from the province, and then there's things that we want. And I think there's a number of things here that we can cut back. Yes, there's items in the budget for service reviews. And I believe as we go through that process, we're going to find a number of ways to keep those costs down. We already had a memo about, the meeting costs, and I think we got it down to $90 for our first service review committee. And I'm like, it's already paying for itself, in my opinion, that we're getting those figures down. But with a financial plan like this, and I get it, our staff are doing what they've been directed to. And I guess my request is for the board to go, can we keep doing this? Can we keep approving these kind of increases? Because I don't think this is what the community wanted. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the draft before you, you could make specific motions to remove stuff from the budget at this point. That would be totally appropriate. That's what we're here. We're looking at the draft. You can make amendments to the draft by motion. What can't be done today is get a staff perspective on something we haven't received a report on yet. And so that I think that's the distinction between, well, what can we do here today and how does the process work? And it would have been great to get perspectives around this, that, or the other thing. So if we wanted a report that asked about what's the impacts if we cut out all of the, or if we cut the capital plan in half, or whatever it is you wanted to look at. We would have had to have asked for that a little while ago to have it available today to discuss. But if there's line items in this budget that is before you that you want to propose be changed, you could do that here at the Finance Committee and have the committee discuss that. I just wanted to provide that perspective on the process that we're in, and how you lower the numbers is by changing the draft to something different.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think this discussion illustrates the conundrum that I'm in. Like, I'm learning as I go, but you know, our additional charges as of the last draft, right? $600,000 kind of rough numbers for consultants and things that we think we're going to have to do, things that we're anticipating we're going to do. And I guess what I'm struggling with is they're included in the draft. You actually have to argue them out of the draft. They're not even work that we've done or even know yet. I think our staff know because they're in the middle of it. So I'm in a position where I have to like stand up and say, oh, I want to remove this and remove that, all valid work, all valid projects, or not. And I'm at the point now where I'm, you know, I talked to Andrew or Director Fall earlier, you know, to be let the other directors notice, like, as these budgets unfold every year, I am not prepared to endorse 16.5, whatever double-digit increases in Area A anymore. And 35% admin increases every year. Like, you know, it's just totally unsustainable. It's not our staff's fault. It's the work that we have to do, the work that we want to do, as you said, right? And sometimes the answer, I guess, in my other professional life is it's going to take longer. Right? It's not going to happen right now. I mean, so risk ranking all these things we're trying to do, it's, you can tell I'm a little, you know, I'm looking at these numbers and trying to say, oh, I'm going to take out of the budget instead of maybe our future needs being proposed to be included in the budget. See where my mind is at? So, and then this discussion on surplus is very interesting because it's almost, and again, it seems like we're planning, we keep our surpluses and then we plan them into the next year, and things just keep increasing that way. So I'm kind of looking at our surpluses. I understand reserves. We've done some good work, I think, hard work because it's more money planning on the reserves, but it's the surpluses and how we're using those and how we're forecasting them. And you know, we've had some good discussions around it. So it's just my thoughts, but you know, like I said, next year there's going to be some tough decisions because we can't keep doing this.
Okay, well, I imagine the financial staff is listening to all the comments being made, and you know, maybe some modifications can be made to how the draft proposals are presented in the future. So that
I'll try to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's our decisions as to whether we cut services, and those are the tough decisions. So we all, as individuals, have to be looking for those opportunities. Director Southcott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a pretty sobering subject. Certainly questions going on in my mind for some time. I just have to reflect that the city is facing considerable pressure right now. And the city council is expecting reports at the end of this month that I'm kind of cringing to think about what's going to be suggested. But this table is in the same region. And, but I have a question, and that is of Director Gisborne, and that specifically with regard to your mention of the Sunshine Coast Regional District's discussion. could you, off the top of your head, give us a percentage of what of their budgets are congressional, cuttable, the want to haves?
I think this is getting us
Yeah,
beyond the scope of approving
I
our budget.
apologize, Chair, but this is contextual for me because I really appreciate at least considering this. I know it's a slight bit esoteric at this point. However, it's looming, and should we not plant the seeds at this point? Speaking for myself, I need to plant seeds in order to be prepared for future. And
I'm just wondering if this is a conversation that could be held outside of.
yeah, probably it could. So
Then you can go into more
I'll
depth.
do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay,
To answer, I'll be happy to work with you offline.
there, just go offline and deal with that.
So Chair, maybe, sorry, barring anything
Yeah, I'm
else,
just
should we make our
looking-
motions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just let me.
Okay.
Can I request a quick bio break?
What's that? Oh, well, I mean, we are almost done here, aren't we? Yeah.
Thought we got a whole plethora of motions to say that.
Okay.
And the-
For the pain relief.
Consideration motion.
Another finance committee.
All right, we can take a break, sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go to 3:05. How about that?
Thanks, Chair.
Then we might get through in time for. Still won't get there.
Yes.
I know well.
I think there's food now.
I have a question very quickly.
You know where you were?
What's your impression of the homelessness task force?
then I
They're open the right windows.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, and we left off with the financial plan draft 3. We had some motion
Yeah.
associated with this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As per our discussions around Lasqueti, the same thing. I've actually, Director Fall helped me identify some surpluses that it makes sense to me. I hope I got the figures right. So the first one is for North Side. You can see 98891, and our manager of financial services can correct my numbers if they're wrong, but I think that's what I see in the report as far as the surplus, and I'd like to apply it to the budget and reduce taxation if I can.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Director Gisborne seconds. Any discussion? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'm willing to support this motion, though it does make me think about the direction that our board gave many years ago related to MVFD, which was any like surplus that we had in operating automatically went to the reserve. And that was to kind of, encourage the department to, if you could turn the lights out when you go home kind of thing, or turn down the heat, that any cost savings that would be, realized would then be used to fill the reserves. And that was kind of like an alternative perspective to specifically earmarking money into the reserve. However, this is not MVFD. This is a fire department that's not in my area. And if this is the direction the director wishes to go, I will support it.
Okay, any other discussion?
I have a question.
Sorry, Director Fall.
Chair, and that's actually through the chair. The motion passed for LIVFD pulled back a little bit from the identified surplus. So the question is for Ms. Green, and how much uncertainty is there still in the budget, and would it be useful to provide, a little wiggle room, like making, modifying the motion to be, a bit over 90 or 95 or something? I don't know how much would be appropriate, but is there a need to have, a little bit of hold back some of the reserve, some of that surplus to be able to account for expenses that aren't finalized yet?
Chair, yes, there is a lot of uncertainty still in those reserves, because this was I don't remember when the actuals were, but this report would have been prepared right at the end of January, and we were still trying to get invoices and trying to get our goals done. So there is quite a bit of uncertainty in these reserves. So it would be prudent to leave a bit. That's why I suggested doing a dollar value, because to try to do the full surplus, we don't know what that surplus is going to be until we've had our audit.
Fair enough. Director Lennox, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sorry. My first line of thought, Chair, was that I would just direct any surpluses, but I think what I'm hearing is that there should be a dollar figure. Just want to confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's if there's a dollar figure, because we don't always have all of our units. There could be something that comes up at year end that we aren't anticipating. And if it's significant, then it could, it could mean it may be after March 31st when the budget has to be submitted to the province.
Right. If you have any,
I guess what I'm asking, is there a reasonable number?
okay, yeah. Ms. Green, would you have some sort of suggested number, or
I don't have one.
might be more
Thank you,
appropriate?
So I would recommend we could say that direct staff to allocate $90,000 of the surplus. It gives about $9,000 of wiggle room.
Sure.
A lot, but at least that gives a dollar value.
Okay,
Through the chair, completely understood, and I'd like to.
okay. Since it has been moved and seconded, can we just get unanimous consent by
Friendly
the
amendment?
board members to change it to 90,000?
I'm
Okay,
good.
so we're at 90,000. Director Elliott, you had your hand up?
Agreeing.
Okay.
I was trying to agree with you, yes.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we're back at the motion. We have 90,000 put in there. Any other discussion, or are we ready to vote on it? Looks like we're ready to vote on it. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. And Director Lennox, you have a second
Thanks,
one?
Chair. Yep, this one will be for Savory, and we'll let the corporate officer catch up. Along the same lines, I'd like to make an amendment to 90,000 for this one as well.
Okay,
I'll second that.
second by Director Fall. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries.
Sorry, Michelle.
Sorry. Okay, and Director Gisborne.
Yes, I have a motion, well, actually I have multiple motions, but I'll put the first one forward. And I think this is along the lines of what Director Brander had spoke to, and would be that the committee recommend that the board remove the earmarked community works funds from solid waste management to the community works funds reserve, and that staff be directed to bring forward a 20-year long-term borrowing for the 2.5 million requirement.
I'm just, when we already know the staff is gonna be coming forward with a report regarding this. Correct. So, not even sure if a motion is necessary if we already know.
Like, I'm just worried that we actually have a motion on the table. With regards to this, that might have to be addressed first, and this might not be in line with that. And I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared to speak to it.
I was wondering, it does affect the financial plan.
Well, we already know that the payment from the RRC is going to be accounted for, and we don't need to deal with it in this budget. So if the financial department is already working on it,
So
see what the corporate officer has to say.
thank you, through the chair. I do believe that there's a motion that has been postponed from September 25th that will be at the March Finance Committee, presented with the correspondence from the city of Powell River along with the old staff report. And it might be better to have that motion. Since that one's already on the table, we should probably dispose with that one before we consider a new one on the same topic.
So that'll be at the March Finance Committee? Yeah.
Okay, you have another motion?
Well, yes. If that's the case, then I believe this motion for this current financial plan is the recommendation to send it to the board for adoption at the end of this month. I would like to propose an alternative motion where we send this financial plan to the March Finance Committee. And if I get a seconder, I'll explain.
Second by Director Lennox.
Yeah, Community Works Funds is not a small amount of money. Over $1 million. If we end up deciding to use it for electoral area services like fire protection, so on and so forth, that will have an impact on our budget. That will, I think it will change how we perceive even the fire department reserves. There are a number of items in our financial plan that I do think we need to go through and look at, cutting out. And if we want to do that today, I can go through and put forward motion after motion, to remove the flagpole and let's consider taking the truck out and things like that. But we do have a board meeting to get to. But with the financial plan as it is, how we deal with that $2.5 million related to the solid waste management service, I think it's a big issue. And also tomorrow we're going to be having our preliminary service review meetings. Now, after we have those preliminary service review meetings, I think we're going to have a better idea and a better picture of how much those service reviews are going to cost. We've allocated, I think, $25,000 to social planning and the sub-regional recreation one. However, after that meeting tomorrow, we might end up going like, we're not even going to come close to that, or something might come up and we go, oh, we got to spend even more. Our budget is not due until the end of March. So I would actually be willing to move a motion that we have a final draft come before us in March. And I would even ask that we would potentially direct staff to bring forward a list of the non-required budget drivers associated with our financial plan. And then we can go through and decide which ones do we want to cut out. And of course, we would understand which ones must stay. That's where my current thought is, Chair, if that's okay with you.
It doesn't matter if it's okay with me. Any other comments? McCormick.
If I'm understanding the motion correctly, Director Gisborne, what you're suggesting is that we take out of the budget the approved community works fund that we've already allocated to the Resource Recovery Center, move those back to the community works reserve, and then work to fund that funding along with the new 2.5 or whatever it is. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
That one was out of order, because we have a motion that's coming up having to deal with that already. So we're gonna postpone that motion to next month. Know that part.
Yeah, to answer Director McCormick's question, that was the intention of the original motion I'd put forward, though it was ruled out of order because that will be decided in March at the Finance Committee. And seeing as how that has such a significant impact, you know, where over $1 million of community works funds go, I do believe that when we make that decision in March, it would make sense for us to take a look at the financial plan one last time and see where we can allocate either the community works funds that becomes available, or if we lose it all to the solid waste management service, then we're going to have to find another source of the revenue, which would be taxation. I would prefer to deal with it today, but it was said we'll deal with it next month. So hence why the motion is to do one last kick at the can of the financial plan in March, when hopefully we make that decision on what are we doing with our community works.
Okay, I have Director Elliott. Is there anybody else that wants to put their hand up? There you go ahead, Director Elliott.
Thank you. Put my mic down. Thank you, Chair. So I am aware that when we shift those around and should we be doing the 2.5 million in borrowing, that will add to our requisition differently than what it's in this current draft, right? And so the proposed draft 3 says what the average single family household is going to be impacted in each of the regions in the city. That's going to change when we add the 2.5 in borrowing into the equation. But I think the numbers can be seen in a separate report where we just talked about this particular question. I wanted to maybe just for the public's benefit who's following along, ask staff what the difference will be when if that 2.5 million is decided to be borrowed as far as impacts to this draft go for the bottom line on the requisitions.
Thanks. I noticed that Ms. Green had her hand up already, so.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. The $2.5 million of potential borrowing is actually included in this financial plan because it wasn't decided. So we thought it would be best to show directors what it would look like with that borrowing in there. And then if they decided to use community works, then we could add that in. But so there wouldn't be any, there would have been a decrease to the requisition if it was decided that it was all going to be used from community works. But because it was undecided, it's already in there, so there won't be an increase to the requisition.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, do we have any other comments?
So I'm just reading motion. If this motion passes, would the draft that we receive also include the changes that we've made today? Or would it be this draft without any changes? I think it would have the changes.
I don't know if there's enough time to incorporate in them, but there would be.
Ms. Green?
Through the chair, I could incorporate them, as long as it's okay if they're directed from the committee straight to staff, as long as I don't have to go through the board meeting first.
Yeah, corporate officer.
Thank you, through the chair. They were going to go through the board first.
Then would that have enough? As long as I can have them in time to incorporate them before I publish the next draft.
Seeing nods here, I'm not really sure what that.
There is timing constraints. I mean, best efforts could be made, but.
Okay.
Could we just pass a motion this afternoon at our board meeting if we wanted to expedite the process to give our manager of financial services as much leeway as possible?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
the corporate officer says yes. Great. Any other comments on this motion to bring this draft back to, well, have another draft at the March committee? To dispense with it right now. Director McCormick.
Thank you. If the cost of borrowing, the 2.5, is already built into the budget, I'm not sure what would change substantially by delaying by a month the approval of the budget, since it's already in there. If anything, we might get a reduction at the end of it. So on one hand, I agree with the concept of leaving it as long as possible, allowing as much dialogue and as much public input as possible. And yes, it isn't due until the end of March. But I'm trying to understand the benefit of waiting a month, since we're already at this place. Like, what is it that we're anticipating that would come back that would be different in March? Are you anticipating, if I may, Chair, ask, is the mover anticipating a round of recommendations for reductions of this budget, or to come forward for March, or what is the expectation in asking that it be delayed?
Question, because by the time it comes around again, we really are at the 10th hour. So, Director Gisborne?
Yes, that is my anticipation. If we end up doing full borrowing, which has already been included in the budget, then that doesn't really change the solid waste management service. However, having those community works funds available for things like our fire departments will have a change on taxation. If we are able to then start earmarking community works funds for, say, fire apparatus, then a lot of our contributions that we've earmarked, for example, MVFD, we can then actually reduce those contributions, because then we can actually go like, well, we'll be hopefully building our reserves to use community works funds for those initiatives. On top of that, there's a number of other listed items in draft 2, draft 1, and draft 3. For example, flagpole, consultants, things like that. And I myself am prepared to go down that list and start moving motions to start removing those items. But out of time's sake, for the rest of the board, I presume we actually want to get to our board meeting, which just started 20 minutes ago, I think. Or is it 4 o'clock? Oh, good. So we do have time. But I was also thinking that we could even ask our staff to come back with a list of the items that are not required for the services. So just looking at the top of the list on draft 2, $10,000 flagpole. I don't think that's a requirement. Sorry to pick on the flagpole.
Okay, I guess I would ask Ms. Greenan about any, let's say, challenges associated with pushing this off for another month, and also staff time that would be required to work on this, because we don't have to spend unnecessarily. Do you have a comment, corporate officer? Or?
Oh, just thank you. I think that that would be a different motion, that we would be, we're talking about something different than the motion that was originally proposed. So we'd want to amend this, I think.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. That would be what was just mentioned would be very different from the motion that we have in front of us. So let's stick with the motion we have in front of us. And I'm going to rescind my question to Ms. Greenan, because it's not appropriate at this point. Are there any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Just quickly, like thinking about this motion, thinking about what's been said, and thinking about myself, really trying to do everything I can in the budget cycle here. Having another month would probably help me to really drill even deeper, listen to my other directors, and if we have time, I'm in support of this motion. There's so much going on, so many moving pieces, and so much cost associated. I think it behooves me, at least, to try to use up all of our available time to get it right. Thanks.
Chair?
Yes, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak. While it would be nice to get this done this month, I'm not. I don't mind I don't mind allowing one more round at this for the reasons that Director Lennox just articulated. But I do want to caution the committee that we should put us forward as many changes today as are possible, because what we cannot do in March is, if this passed, what we cannot do is get into a big round of massive changes that make it difficult for our financial staff to finalize a report in time. I don't want to cause too much sweat on the brows to get it finalized. So ideally, we get as many changes as possible now, and then that might be just a final review and hopefully a sign off.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. Coming into March is not the time to be making a lot of changes to the budget. So anyway, I think you've had a lot of kicks at the can here. I think we're just going to call the question now. So again, the motion is that the draft of the financial plan be forwarded to the March Finance Committee meeting. We'll sure with that. So we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. No opposition. New business, or sorry, is there another question?
Good try.
Oh, reconsideration, right? From January 7th.
It's someone who voted in the majority, which everyone voted.
Right. Yeah.
Would
Just keeping us on
like to
track.
move it.
The good one.
Me.
The first is move reconsideration.
Okay, so we've moved the reconsideration of this. Is somebody seconding consideration?
Second that.
Thank you. I've put forward a slightly alternative motion to our corporate officer, and that would be to change the contribution to reserve fund from the 200,000 down to 50,000. And I'm not sure if that would be amendment, because now this motion is before the assembly. So our corporate officer can hopefully help me with the procedure. One of the reasons is fire apparatus is covered by community works funds, and fire apparatus is one of those things that needs to be replaced after the 20 to 25 year period. This is specific to fire hall. The reserve funds are rather quite healthy right now. We are going through the service review, but as I understand, there isn't really like a plan on the books for replacing the fire hall. We all recognize that the hall is old and we do need to find a new location and to get a new hall built. But at the same time, any operating costs that are saved and realized from the service do go into reserves already. I know this is still above what the original motion was, which I think was to go from 29,000, which was the previous financial plan contribution. And, seeing the very high tax requisitions in electorals areas B and C, it comes down to the wants and needs. And I go, you know what? I think we all want a new fire hall, but we're going to need a new fire truck. And we do have some pretty good reserves over at the MVFD. So taking a look at the 2024 reserves, 386,000 for fire hall reserve, 560,000 for apparatus, and then non-statutory reserve 2024 is 322,000. So this would be simply, I'm hoping that we can kind of change the motion. Rather than going up to the 200,000, we can bring it down to the 50,000, and hopefully community works funds comes back. We can kind of pair those values up and then start planning for a new fire hall. Of course, that's also going to require public engagement and public input. I would be more inclined to increase the contribution to the apparatus reserve, but this is specific to the fire hall apparatus. Or sorry, the fire hall reserve. Sorry. I got the two wires crossed. Sorry.
Okay, so go ahead, put it off. Lead us through this.
First, we're still on the motion to reconsider. So that is whether to focus on that. The motion's not yet on the table.
Oh, sorry.
So once you
This is just to
vote on,
reconsider what the process was.
a
Consideration.
motion to reconsider is debatable, but it doesn't go into. It goes into the reasons why you might want to.
My apologies. I was a step ahead.
Any discussion on the motion to reconsider? Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So just trying to understand the reconsideration rules, we would vote to reconsider or not to reconsider. Once the motion's on the floor, do you not have to vote on it as is? And then defeat that motion and put a whole new motion forward if you want something different? It's not an amendable motion, is it?
If I could just have a moment to check, I do think it may need to be defeated and then a new motion proposed.
That's what I'm asking you.
Because I was prepared to just move an amendment from 200 to 50.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that.
Chair, I can't see the motion because it's way over there, but if we focus on the motion, I think it's giving staff annual direction. And I think you gotta focus on that this is annual direction, year after year, budget after budget. So focus on that when you're thinking about the reconsideration. I guess where I'm getting at is that other information provided by Director Gisborne, it would fit into that, but it would be like a quick one-time thing now where this is futuristic every year.
Okay. Thank you. Yep, Corporate Officer.
Okay, thank you for that moment. So if the motion to reconsider is approved, the original motion is reopened immediately. It doesn't require a mover or seconder. It's considered to be on the table, and all rules of debate are applied to that. So in this case, the motion would be amendable.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, let's move on to the vote then for reconsideration and get past that step. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. All right, so now we're at the stage where we can entertain.
Yes.
Yeah, I would move that the figure 200,000 be amended to 50,000.
There we go. Directors Gisborne and Lennox, comments. Director Gisborne. You
Um,
already made a lot of the comments.
I'll be super quick. To our CIO's point, absolutely, this would be a year over year. We already do have extra operations going in to our reserves. And now, we're still getting under our feet, what community works funds can be used for. Historically, they have not been allowed to be used for fire halls and fire apparatus. Now they are. And when we get a determination on what we're going to do with the over $1 million of community works funds that's kind of sitting over at the Resource Recovery Center, if it does come back for rural projects, and I don't think we're going to need to contribute $200,000 a year to the MVFD for a new fire hall, because please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe Area C more than Area B, which is where hall number 1 is located, has not received its fair share of community works funds in quite a long time. So I think 50 is appropriate, and then we sort out community works funds. If we run out, then I guess we'll increase it in the future year. But I think it's enough.
Seeing no other hands, seeing as I'm representing the other area that is part of this, I had come into this meeting with the concept of reducing that reserve budget as well, but I'm not particularly comfortable going down to 50. I'd go down to 100. In the report from December, the Finance Committee, it says the optimal contribution would be over $278,000. We do have a hall replacement coming up, and there are limited community works funds. I am more in favor of, I don't want to rely too heavily on borrowing in the future. I do hope there's gonna be community works funds, because yes, Area C especially has gotten the short end of the stick there, but I think I could be okay with a $100,000 contribution.
I want to split the difference at 75.
I'm coming from 200 down to 50 is too big a jump. If I could do 100, I would still feel that I'm being responsible enough, because right now the current at 29 is just really, really low. When they're recommending 278 and we're coming in 178,000 below that.
Then I would request that we all vote this amendment down and happily move an amendment for 100,000.
Or can we just, with consent of the group, change it to 100?
If everybody consents, then that's allowed, but if
Everybody
anybody does not, then we would vote.
Sounds like everybody consents.
I'm good.
Okay.
Great. Director Elliott, is your hand up still or is that just from before?
Yep.
I didn't see your hand up in the corner.
Yeah, I am still up.
Okay, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to further comment that the community works funds are like you can't carry them forward indefinitely. They have to be spent within a certain length of time, and by making your number go down, you're kind of committing community works funds before they're even committed, and should you can't save up enough for a whole fire hall to make it a significant amount because of the time limits that are on them. So I just wanted to caution everybody that there's a lot of limits on that one.
Okay, thanks very much. Seeing no other hands, we'll vote on this. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carried.
I think that was on the amendment now.
No, we just did consent.
That was changing of the amendment though, right? We consented to change, so now we got the main motion.
Okay, all right. All right, so that was the amendment, folks. I hope you're all okay with that. Let's go to the main motion as amended. Again, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. Great. And let's go back to the agenda here. New business. There's no new business now, right? Question period. No questions. Mr. Galinsky, are you on?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I am on the air here. I had a couple of questions, if you will indulge me.
Sure, why not?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm wondering what the city's request for recreational funding was on the letter from the mayor. It seems to me it was in excess of $300,000. I don't have that number at my fingertips, and I'm wondering if the general manager of financial services has that number for me.
Holly was just asking for the maximum. I don't have a dollar figure associated with that. I don't know if Ms. Greenan does, but we can forward it to you.
I thank you for that, Chair. That would be good. Also, with regard to item 8.3, the recently concluded third draft of the 5-year financial plan, it seems to me that there was a percentage drop for the average single-family dwelling from draft 3 to draft 2, and I'm wondering if that is indeed the case through the chair.
I'll have to go to Ms. Greenan for that.
Busy.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I'll just be a couple of minutes to find that.
It was a drop from draft 2 to draft 3, is that what you said?
Yes, Chair. I seem to recall, for example, in draft 2, the city's increase was about 13%, and in draft 3, it was about 10%. I could be wrong on my figures, but I'm trying to verify that, Chair.
Okay, let's see what Ms. Greenan can come up with us. You, yep.
Would it be okay? Thank you, through the chair. Would it be okay if I emailed you the change?
It would be totally appropriate, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask questions.
Very welcome. Okay, seeing as we have no session, we've reached the end of our agenda and we're adjourned. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Get off that phone, Andrew.
Recording stopped.